Yeah, and do turn your phones down to silent, which I'm going to do right now because there is nothing worse than getting a call from a telephone solicitor in the middle of an event. Fantastic.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. So Patrick came over and said, come over in 3 minutes. So I set my timer for 3 minutes, and it's going to go off any second.
Oh, you're good.
I don't know how to turn it off.
Oh,
No worries. I just used my watch. I literally legit have no idea how to turn off my alarm.
the only
I
reason
usually have my wife here to do that kind of stuff.
and,
Fine.
and we will use the mics not for the group, but really
Right,
mostly
right.
For,
Sorry.
for the online. No worries, no worries. All right. So, Patrick, are we live, or are we just been kind of babbling online? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Poison Pen event. My name is Patrick. The gentleman in the back running the tech is also Patrick. I'm the science fiction, fantasy, and horror selector here at the store. And I am so lucky to have Philip Fracassi, author of the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, which I just, before you came in, just completely ruined the title because it just left me. And then, and this is your what? This is your 10th book, right? Close to it.
I think it's my sixth book.
Sixth book.
I think it's oh no, I'm sorry, my sixth novel.
Sixth.
But yes, my 10th, including my story collections.
Yeah. And you've been a Bram Stoker nominee and award winner, I believe.
Just a nominee.
Nominee.
Yeah.
One cream of the crop for good horror.
Yeah.
And we have Brian Asman. This gentleman right here in the very cool blazer there, and he's here for another one of my favorite titles of the year, Man Fuck This House, which is a brilliant title for a haunted house novel. So we've got Man Fuck This House as a novella, and then several other short stories within this book published by Blackstone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big warm welcome to Philip Fracassi and Brian Asman. So, fortunately, we're not monetized on YouTube, so we may just get a parental warning for the number of times that we say the F word tonight. So, I'm just going to let you guys know. So, we may become an adults only. You have to be 18 to watch this YouTube video. Completely fine with it. We've had a few weird ones, which is good. So, these are two spectacular horror novels. So I want to I'm really curious. Philip, we'll start with you. Tell us where Autumn Springs, the retirement home, and the whole massacre, where did that idea come from?
Yeah, so I was actually doing a tour for my other Nightfire novel, Boys in the Valley, and in 2023, and I actually was at Poison Pen for that. And my wife and I were we were staying at a Marriott in Virginia. And it was like, I'm from LA, so we're not used to like things like grass and space. So we were at this Marriott, and you kind of going up this winding, beautiful green hill, and then at the top there's all these old, like Civil War era historical buildings, and they're like brick buildings, and there's like this kind of compound, and then you look around and there's beautiful green sloping, hills, and we were doing like a sunset walk because it was just so nice. And I made the comment, I said, this place feels more like a retirement home than a hotel. And then I was like, because as our writer brains do, as horror writers, we're like, well, that'd be kind of interesting. Maybe there's a horror idea there, and what would that look like? And then as we kept walking, I was like, well, maybe I'll throw a serial killer in a retirement home. That could be cool. And then we got back to the room, literally after that walk, and I opened my laptop, and I typed the words, the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, and I wrote 2 paragraphs kind of about the general vibe of what it would be. I sent it to my agent. We went to dinner. The next morning, my agent replied and said, you've got to write this book. And then a few days later, I was in New York City continuing with that tour, and I was at drinks with my editor, and I said, hey, I had this kind of idea, and it's a slasher set in a retirement home. And she was like, yeah, I love it. Let's do it. And that was it. So that was where the idea originated.
Where it bloomed was in Virginia, in a Marriott.
Yeah.
And did you find a dead body anywhere on site? Because I think the woods of Virginia, lend itself pretty well to a good murder.
No, it was no dead bodies. It was a very tranquil sunset stroll. And I think, and I think in a way, it's like, one of the things about this book is the setting is, the retirement community where these people live. It's not like a scary place. It's not a bad place. It's not an evil place. There's not the evil, abusive orderly. There's not a evil doctor. There's no hygiene. It's just a nice retirement community, and that's part of what I think makes the horror side of it really land, is because these are real people who are three-dimensional, who you come to fall in love with and enjoy, and then I slowly start killing them all. And I don't.
Technically, you are the killer, though, Philip. Brian, tell us a little bit about Man Fuck This House and where this came from.
Sure. Yeah. So this book started as a Twitter joke, actually. I tweeted one day, you know what would be a really funny title for a haunted house book? Man, fuck this house. And a bunch of people were like, you should go write that. And so I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Let me go write this book. Now, the circumstances were a little unusual because this was in 2020, which we all know was a very unusual year. But I had a book that had been on submission, and then all the publishers closed to agent submissions for the first time in history. And I was talking to my agent, and I was like, dude, I have all these ideas for novellas. I want to do something. And she's like, well, why don't you just self-publish a few novellas? So I think I'm probably the only person in history whose agent actually told him to self-publish. I don't think anyone has ever gotten that advice from their agent before. Maybe I'm wrong. But so anyway, the book itself, I wrote very quickly. I wrote in about 6 weeks, actually, just kind of flowed out. I lived in this house in college where a bunch of weird stuff happened. And that was a bit of an inspiration for the book. So the book comes out, it does pretty well. And then a few months later, the writer Molly Hodgson, who wrote Star Wars Rogue One and Jurassic World, tweeted about it. And she was like, this is the best title for a haunted house book I've ever read. And then boom, to the stratosphere, Blackstone came calling. This was right around the time that Eric LaRocca had sold the rights to Things Have Gotten Worse Since Last We Spoke to Titan. And so the idea was, hey, we'll just do that. I actually call it pulling a LaRocca, what I did. And so here we are now, a couple years later, with this beautiful new volume. It's the original novella, which I've expanded. There's brand new chapters. There's a whole other day in it, actually. So it's really the version of the story that I wanted to tell the first time, but was limited by space constraints. There's also 6 other short stories in here, 2 of which have already been sold to Hollywood. So, get in on the ground floor now.
And both books are incredible. I mean, they're really, really a lot of fun. And one of the things that I really love about the horror genre is the fact that you get to focus on real world people, real world issues, and you're putting them into situations which may seem a little abnormal, but at the same time, I think we always have a little bit of the supernatural, a little bit of the weird things that happen to us that we can't really explain. What is it about the horror genre that draws you into wanting to write it? And what were some of the main things that you wanted to focus on and sort of discuss as themes within your novels?
For me, I always talk about my attraction to horror and the supernatural is that I love the space it gives me to explore any idea I want to explore and go any direction I want to go. There are no guardrails in horror, You can put a giant cosmic spider at the end of the novel, and it's like, yep, look, it's great. It makes sense. And the analogy that I often give is like in horror, you can have someone get up in the dark middle of the night and open the closet door, and there can be a serial killer in the closet, or there can be a monster in the closet, or there can be outer space in the closet, and it all works. It all flies because it's horror. So for me, that's what I love the most about writing supernatural, writing horror. I mean, I kind of classify my stuff a little bit more as supernatural thrillers, although some of it is definitely hard horror. But but I love the idea of like there just being no guardrails is exciting for me, and I as a writer it's so much fun to play in a sandbox that is endless. And as far as themes specifically to this book, I'll talk about is, I really wanted, when I first started this book, I really thought it was going to be a little more darkly comic. I thought it was going to be a little more kind of gag filled, not a comedy, but kind of like a dark, dark humor, with some sort of like wink moments and nudge moments kind of thing. And then as I was writing it and I got more into these characters, and these characters started really becoming flesh and blood and having these personalities and these histories, and as I became more immersed in Autumn Springs, and I started thinking about, what would it be like for these people? What are they thinking about? What are their dreams? What are their, concerns? What are their fears? And then on top of that, what would happen to them if I dropped this serial killer in their midst? And how would they respond to that? And what would that look like? And one of the things that I kind of take on as a theme in the book is I don't want to call it the idea of discussing ageism, but I think it naturally comes up within the story. Like, I think in a lot of times the elderly are portrayed in horror, whether it be movie, especially in movies maybe where, it's kind of a gag, where there's a body shaming element to horror movies with old elderly people in it. And they're always kind of these two-dimensional cutouts where they're, either the villainous or they're alone or they're, they're knitting or they're in a, they're kind of the old frail wheelchair. And I wanted everyone in this book to feel alive and to feel real and to feel like they had a lot to contribute and a lot to give and be complex and have, like I said, dreams and histories and all that stuff. So for me, it was like, I want my residents to feel like real people. And so I ended up making that kind of a theme for the story where it's really, whereas I think originally I thought of it more like, oh, this is going to be like a horror slasher. Now it's kind of turned into, this is really about Rose Dubois, her character arc and all of her friends, and what it's like to be going through what they're going through. What are they, what are their lives looking like? And then the horror and slasher element is really kind of like a through line to explore their characters. So that was one of the big themes for me, was I really wanted to get into the minds and psyches of the elderly and the fears of, of medical issues and the fears of death and the what their families want and independence, and how can you continue to be independent when your independence is failing you. And, so a lot of that is in the book. And I'm not a preachy guy. I'm an entertainer. I'm here to entertain you guys. So I try to weave it into the stories in a way that it propels the story versus like bogs down the story. And I think it works.
And it's really a cool theme, considering I often thought of Red when I was reading your book, because I was thinking to myself, it's one of those situations where, age can be a benefit. And it's one of the kind of the themes that you sort of discuss a little bit throughout the book. Brian, what about you? What you've got some really interesting themes in terms of family, especially throughout Man Fuck This House.
Yeah, so one of the inspirations for the book was there was this coffee table book in the early 2000s called Post Secret. I don't know if anyone remembers it, but you would write in and tell them a secret of yours. So I was flipping through it one day, and Horton Plaza in downtown San Diego, which is the most bizarre and improbable shopping center you can imagine. Just Google it. It's like an M.C. Escher painting. It's insane. But anyway, I was in the Walden Books there, and I remember I was flipping through this book, and one of the secrets was, I love one of my children. And so that was one of the inspiration that's always stuck with me. And that's been one of the inspirations for the book, and the stuff I wanted to work out with this book was, think about ideas of family, right? And how you feel about your family. And is that always, it's not always something that you can really talk about, because especially if you're a parent, you really have a party line that you must adhere to when it comes to your children, right? Like, you can't even say this one's kind of my favorite. It's like, no, I love all my children equally. And I'm always like, do you? I don't know if I believe that, right? Like, and maybe at different times you feel different ways, but the cool thing about this book is I've had a number of women come up to me at conventions who are moms and just kind of whispered to me, look, you articulated things that I feel like I'm not even allowed to let myself think in this book. And so that's been so cool for me. I've really appreciated that. It's meant a lot to me seeing just I could give like a voice to sort of like ideas that are uncomfortable and that you're not supposed to talk about, while also wrapped up in like hopefully what is a fun horror story at the same time. It's funny, you said your original concept for Autumn Springs was much more comedic, and this was originally going to be like a super slapstick fratty ghost comedy, and then it was going to be like Van Wilder meets Poltergeist or something like that, and then I decided to go a different direction with it, basically. And I'm so glad I did, because there are really over the top humorous parts, especially with like the middle school teacher, for anyone who's read it, who is teaching Zack Snyder's 300 as like history. There's stuff like that that's kind of absurd, but there's also, I think, moments of true horror and some scares in here, I think. At least I hope. I tried to put them in. I don't know. You be the judge. So.
Both books have humor in them. I mean, you guys don't. And one of the things I love about horror is the fact that you can throw a little humor in there, and dark humor. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we love the Final Destinations is because of the fact that people die in really horrendous, horrible ways, but sometimes they're a little funny too. You can't help but laugh. A little gallows humor.
Yeah. Death is one funny motherfucker. I'll say that.
Boom, 18 and over.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were already there. So
absolutely, I think
all right, I can take off my pants now. Then
100%. Now it's only fans, but the Poison Pen's only fans.
Like and subscribe.
Exactly. One of the cool things, I mean, Philip, we've had really sort of here at the store smash successes with books like Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club, Deanna Raybourne's Killers of a Certain Age. You're sort of the first author that's really decided to take older people into horror that I can think of recently. And you start us off and you throw the wool over our eyes. I almost thought, I'm like, am I reading a kind of like a cozy thriller?
Yeah, and tonally, the book was. I don't even want to say it was a challenge. It was so much fun to write this book because contrast with like my novel Boys in the Valley, which is about a bunch of orphans. I kind of have a wink in this book where I refer to it as sort of like an octogenarian orphanage, because it's sort of a similar setup to Boys in the Valley, which is these people are trapped in an isolated space with horror and death. But yeah, the book has funny moments and it has scary moments. And one of the things that I do that I think ties into your question is, one of the things about this book that I found interesting that I learned, you always learn something every book you write. And one of the things that I learned about this book was that I could use the kills to tell a story, meaning the way I wrote the kills told the reader, this is what you should feel about this death. And this is how this death should impact you. And you're either going to be like, very, very, very upset and emailing me angry emails, which I've gotten, or you're going to be like kind of laughing along until you realizing it's gallows humor. And I did want this book to be, I realized I don't know, halfway through the book or whatever, writing it, I realized I really liked the idea of writing a mystery, a whodunit. I've written them before. I have one coming out summer of 27. That's more of a mystery. And I kind of was having fun with that aspect of it. So I found myself drawn to that as a writer. Like I wanted to create, it's the red herrings, there's some misdirection. And I wanted the reader to keep guessing as to who it was, to the point where we actually, in the first draft of this book, there is a killer POV throughout. And in the current published edition, that's all removed because we wanted to make it more of to keep that whodunit element going. So yeah, it definitely kind of like was an interesting process because it is sort of cozy. It's sort of like Thursday Murder Club, but as a horror novel, and everybody dies horribly. And but but I wanted it also to have that element of like a mystery and a whodunit with the through line plot. So it was a very complex book in a lot of ways, but it was something that I don't know, but it felt very natural writing it that way.
It is a complicated book, and it seems like a complicated book to write. And as I was reading it, I'm wondering to myself, like, just getting into the mind of Rose and all of the different people that are living in this retirement home. You know, how are they going to survive? How are they going to deal with this? How will they deal with this? Really, you know, we have a feeling that it isn't something supernatural, that it's really somebody who's just really fucked up. But in a way, I felt like also some of these people are sort of ready to die in a way too.
Yeah,
And at the end of life, I mean, how do you deal with it? You know, if you were in that situation,
I mean, two. I'll answer quickly. Is one is, you know, that's what I mentioned earlier about supernatural. There is a supernatural element to it as well, which makes, you know, which is very purposeful, because I did want the reader sort of thinking like, what exactly is going on at Autumn Springs? You know, what's happening, and is it a serial killer, or is it something supernatural? And like, so that was a lot of fun for me to kind of introduce that wilder element into it. And then, what was your second part of your question? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Just the fact that the people are at the end of their life, you know, and how are they going to deal with this?
Yeah, and that was the other thing. Like one of the other things that excited me writing this book was that there are passages about that there is an acceptance of death at a retirement community, and so that affects multiple levels of the story. It affects the residents sort of having like a comfort level with the idea of death, and when people start dying, it's a negative impact, because now the police are like, well, old folks dying in a retirement home is not exactly headline, you know, news. So they kind of don't take it seriously at first, and the way the kills are happening is you're not really sure exactly if it's a killer. So that was something that I loved the contrast, and the way I express it is that there's passages in the book where I say like death is sitting with you while you're drinking your coffee, and it's in every corner, it's around every hall, you know, every turn, and at some point it'll just, you know, walk up to you and take your hand and take you away, and it's kind of this comfortable almost feeling that you get as a reader. But then when I drop the fox in the hen house, and all of a sudden now that's all blown away, and it's like, well, now there's somebody here violently taking people away. And so contrasting that comfort of death with the violence of a killer was something that I had a lot of fun exploring as a writer.
I can't even imagine. I can't fathom in a way, and that's part of the reason why I'm a reader and not a writer. So I'm really curious. I mean, how did you plot out these books? How did you? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? And in terms of the deaths, I mean, and the same goes for you, Brian. How did you figure out how to murder people?
You go ahead, answer first.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking about how to murder people all the time. I've already thought of like 37 ways to kill every person in this room over and over again.
Meteor.
Yeah, especially you, John.
Meteor.
Especially you. Yeah, so I don't know, like I often find that when I'm killing people off in fiction, the kills kind of just emerge organically through the story. Often, you know, it's like kind of what's around, what's available, what is this person most afraid of, for example. Like, I think that's one thing that you work with a lot is, you know, trying to make people's worst fears become real. So, like, even if the reader isn't particularly scared of a certain thing, they can at least emphasize, like, if a character is really scared of rats and, you know, all of a sudden they're being devoured by rats, I think the reader will empathize there with that character, even if they're like, oh, I have a rat for a pet and he's really cute and his name is Herbie, you know. So, you know, I think that's where the kills come from, is they just kind of emerge organically. But like, I think also sometimes you have some like crazy kill in your mind that you want to figure out a way to work into the book too, that just sort of comes to you. Or, you know, I've certainly been walking around and just seeing some kind of like, I don't know, seeing something and be like, oh, I can do something with that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how many times we, you know, as a writer, you ask like, what if? And like, I wrote a story called Alter, which is about a swimming pool, community swimming pool, which was literally just made into a film by A24. It's coming out next year, but it was all about me literally lying next to a swimming pool and going like, what if like a sinkhole opened up underneath this pool, and what if it was full of kids, and you know, and what if there was like a supernatural element, and next thing you know, it's going to be a movie, you know. So it's always fun to ask those questions. And are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, for me, I'm usually a pantser, but with the next book I'm working on, I am definitely a plotter. I actually had to. I was forced to become one.
Why?
Because my agent was selling a book on proposal.
Oh, yeah. So you had to have like the outline. Yeah.
Which is cool.
Right.
I'm not
Forced to do it.
complaining, but yeah, that's kind of. But yeah, I was more of a pantser before that.
Yeah. So when you submit what's called a partial, you have to give them like 30,000 words, and then you have to outline the rest of the book. So that's how you sell it. So you have to know, and then you can't really mess with that outline. You have to sort of like stick to it. If you're lucky, you can sell as a partial. Most of us have to write the whole manuscript. But I was going to say, I'm actually I'm typically a huge outliner. I'm a screenwriter as well, so I have like we're just taught to a certain way to tell a story, and you have these beats, and you want these pinches and all this shit that you got to put in there, and you got 95 pages or whatever it is. Brian knows, and so it's a bit structured. So all that structure is like storytelling structure that I carried over into my novel writing to a degree. So I love having the novel outlined, like I'm like scientific about it. Like I love having every chapter, and I have notes on each chapter, and I'm like and I know where the pinches are going to be. I know where the misdirections are going to be, and I can steer away from that. If things change as I'm writing, I can change the outline, but I always like the outline first. But what was interesting was, and when you're writing like a mystery thriller that has like time travel elements, you really need to have the outline because you got to know what you're doing. But what's interesting was this book refused to be outlined, like refused to be outlined. I was banging my head against my desk for weeks trying to write an outline, and I just couldn't see the beats. I couldn't see the scenes. I couldn't see what they would do. And then I was like, screw it. I've just got to start writing the book because I had sold it. So I just started writing, and it was a really, really cool experience. And I know most writers actually, as far as who I know, tend to write that way. They just kind of pants it. They just go. I don't like doing it, but I had a really interesting experience with this book, and I think there's a lot of things that I learned writing this book about storytelling because I didn't have everything squared away in advance, and I had to kind of like make it up as I went along, and that fed into I ended up letting the characters take a lot more control, I think. And I was just like, okay, well, let's see what you do now. Let's see what you do now. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's bring this into it. So I had a really good time writing it. I hope I don't have to ever do that again, but and it ended up being more rewriting than I'm used to because of that. But at the same time, I really enjoyed the process.
Yeah, usually pantsers have to rewrite a little bit more.
Yeah, or they'll write 20,000 words
more.
and they'll be like, oh, wait, I can't use any of that. And I'm like, I never want to have that situation. I always want to be able to use every word that I write.
I always think of Brian from Family Guy, where he's always wanting to write the novel The Dog, and it's just this giant stack of papers, right?
Oh, yeah, what's that called? Like The Power of Love or something like that?
Power of Love, yeah.
Faster Than the Speed of Love.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great title. I don't care what anyone thinks.
But that's sort of the thing, because characters can get away from you a little bit, but sometimes they can develop organically.
Yeah, and I have a book called The Blue Butterfly where it was extensively outlined. This is the one I was talking about. It's like where there's kind of time travel. It's a mystery thriller, whodunit kind of thing. And it sounds very artsy-fartsy, and I don't mean it to, but the reality is I was writing a scene like 2/3 of the way through the book, and the character did something I absolutely did not want her to do. And I was like, as I'm writing, I'm going, what are you doing? This is not what we talked about. And it legit changed the last third of the book, and I had to do I had to go back to the outline and go like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I got to change all this stuff. And I ended up completely changing the direction of the book. So when I think when a lot of artists and writers hear outline, they get all like freaked out, like, oh, I'm not I don't follow the rules, man. I'm an artist. And it's like, yeah, but you can follow the rules and then break those rules. And I think it helps to think things through ahead of time and then go back and maybe rework as you go. So at least for me it is. But that was an example where, yeah, the outline just got like blown apart like 2/3 of the way through the book.
What are two things that your characters did in your books that you absolutely hated, and they sort of fought you on it in terms of what they wanted to do and what you wanted them to do?
Ooh. I don't think I really have that, actually. Like all my characters kind of behaved for the most part, but they were kind of. I like to write characters who love to misbehave, so that maybe that's part of it.
In Fuck This House, the relationship between the mom and the kid, that was pretty much that was pretty much how you planned it the whole way through.
It was, yeah. So I mean, I think I had I would say generally the way I write is like, I have like it's like seeing an image in the distance and you're wearing like sunglasses that are kind of smudged, and like you're both walking closer and you're cleaning your glasses at the same time, and things come into more and more resolution. But generally when I write, like I have like even though I'm often a pantser, I have like a pretty firm idea in mind of what I want the book to be, who the characters are, what the vibe is, and then the writing process is really more just kind of like fleshing it out and drilling down versus wholesale changes to things. I will say, when I wrote Good Dogs, my werewolf book, though, I got to the entire end of the book, and I realized the inciting incident would be way more interesting if like a different character were responsible for it, and that if also different characters died at different times. And so that really necessitated like, a page 1 rewrite for that book. And so that almost made me swear off pantsing altogether, just that experience.
Yeah, and I always talk about Christine, right? Because King got like a third of the way through that book writing it in first person, and then realized he'd written himself into a corner, so he had to switch to third person and just kind of hope nobody would notice.
The car was also named Barbara in that first draft, and so
he's talked about it. King's talked about it. I'm not saying nothing he doesn't know. I love King's endings. Aliens.
Especially I like the last Dark Tower book where he's like, you can just stop reading, by the way. You don't actually have to read the ending.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I probably should have.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I actually thought that was a decent ending.
It was pretty cool. No spoilers. Anyway, as far as like characters, I already mentioned the character in Blue Butterfly who did something I absolutely did not want her to do, but I'll say I think I'll answer the more might be interesting is when I had when I was writing this book, because I was pantsing it to my fury, I didn't know who the killer was. I had an idea. And as I wrote, I had a better idea, and then I was kind of like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know who it is. And I was like, or maybe not. And then, and a lot of that got cleared up in the rewrite. But what was interesting for me about this book was that I was writing what was supposed to be the second to last chapter. And I had this whole last chapter in my head, and that last chapter had a twist. And I was like, I can write this chapter, and then I'm going to get to the next chapter, and then I'm really going to let them have it, right? And I was writing what is now the last chapter of the book, and I wrote it, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's the end of the book. And so all the big idea I had for this like other thing just went away, and it affected the rest of the story to the point where it was part of cleaning up in the rewrite. But yeah, sometimes, and that character just ended up being different for me than I had originally thought they would be. So it was less of they were not doing something I wanted to do, but it was more of as I went through the process of writing the characters, they ended up making decisions that I was not necessarily thinking. They ended up becoming different people than I thought they were, put it that way, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. We're like, oh, you know what? You're not so bad. Or you're kind of funny. I like you. Wait a minute. I'm going to give you another line. I'm going to give you more screen time. So yeah, sometimes that happens. And there's like some very minor characters in this book that got more fleshed out. And I wrote a book called The Third Rule of Time Travel. And it's interesting is I had a character in that book that was in literally, I think, 3 paragraphs. And that's a science fiction novel. But the editor at Orbit was like, hey, we really like this guy. Can you write him more? Can you add a scene with him? And I was like, he's like a disruptor. And I was like, yeah, I can write another scene with him. So I added a whole chapter with this character. So sometimes that was always supposed to be just kind of a one scene kind of character. So sometimes characters can really come to life and take on lives of their own.
Yeah, I have to say, you really got me with the killer in this one. It's actually rare.
Spoilers.
I'm not going to spoil anything. I wouldn't do that to anyone. No, but
we're literally live on YouTube.
Yeah. No, I
broadcast over the world. By the way, let me tell you who it is.
I just will say
who they are.
Yeah. No, because I'm a writer, usually when I'm reading a book or watching a movie, I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen for the most part, and it's rare when someone pulls a fast one on me. So, props.
I love the fact that in horror, part of the fun of it is trying to figure out what the fuck's going on, right? I think Brian and I were talking when we were talking about Breathe In, Bleed Out, a little bit about our love of Scream, because of the fact that that was like that was my first slasher film. I was 16. I grew up in a very protective household, so yeah, that was my first. Alien was actually I saw when I was 12, but Scream was my first slasher film.
Alien's kind of a slasher.
It is a slasher, but what I loved about it was that there was that mystery element to it, and everybody, and when people die in fun ways or interesting ways, it sort of adds to it and grabs to it. But I think that horror's moved so much further away from sort of just the slasher piece of it, and right now it's booming. Why do you guys feel like it's booming?
Horror in general or slashers?
Not just slashers, but horror in general, because I mean, we can't keep it on the shelves here at the store.
Well, I mean, I think the standard answer there is that horror is how we deal with the world, and in times where things are more uncertain, where things are more stressful, people do turn to horror to help process.
Yeah, and I think I genuinely think that horror has become such a broader canvas now than it ever was. I think in the 80s and 90s it was Stephen King, Clive Barker, Peter Straub. I think it was zombies, it was vampires, it was tropes, and like even now when you tell somebody who maybe doesn't read horror, you mentioned horror, they're like that's what they think. They think Friday the 13th. They think vampires, and the horror field, the horror fiction field, has gained incredible breadth over the last 10 years. I mean, that I published my first story 10 years ago, and I can tell you, because I know what the field looked like then, and I know what it looks like now, and there have been so many new voices interjected into horror, and so many different perspectives, and so many different personalities, and so many different styles of writing. And you can, when you think that you have everything from from a spatterpunk novels to like Paul Tremblay, and very like literary horror, or you think about Victor LaValle, or you think about Stephen Graham Jones, or there's just so much going on in the field of horror. I mean, I read early this year, I read The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve Dew, and I was like, it really impacted me in a very real world way, and it's a horror novel, but it talks about this like important part of our history as a nation and as a culture, and so I just feel like there's something for everybody would be the easy way to put it, and I think maybe that wasn't the case, in the 80s and 90s, or when horror was booming with King. I feel like right now there's a lot more, this, like I said, there's really another way to put it. There's something for everybody, and you can find something that you like. And even the people that have read Autumn Springs, a lot of those people are not horror readers; they're mystery readers who are finding this book, and it's kind of crossing over. And it's very entertaining to read a lot of the Goodreads reviews when you see these people who are like cozy mystery writers, and they're like, well, I've never read a horror book before, and holy shit, I was thinking this was like a cozy mystery novel, and I don't need to know like what somebody's insides look like when they're cut open, when the belly's cut open. Sorry, kids listening on YouTube. But
I already ruined it.
But then they were like 5 stars, So and there's a lot of that happening with this book in particular, and even Becky Spratford with the American Library Association. She reviewed it for Library Journal, and she came up to me at a recent convention. It was like, I'm so excited about the crossover appeal of this, and it's going to bring so many new readers to horror, and that made me really happy. So I do think it's just. I think the field is so broad, and I think that's why it's more popular now than it ever was.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, just to build on that, is that the way that people discover books has changed so dramatically over the last 10, 15, 20 years. If you think back to like 80s, 90s, etc. Like, first of all, there were fewer books out there, because self-publishing was not really a thing. It had no distribution whatsoever, right? And you go to a bookstore and you'd be limited to what's on the shelf. And like going to the video store, you were making decisions oftentimes based on back cover, copy, and cover. Right. And whoever had the coolest cover art, like, wins, basically, which, if you've seen Grady Hendrix's Paperbacks from Hell, think about that. That's how you're buying books, basically, as well. There's like a skeleton playing a guitar. Sign me up, And it was like that. And now with Book Talk and Bookstagram and everything like that, we've seen this not just in horror, but in other genres like fantasy and romance too, where a lot of self-published work in those genres has taken off. And, I look at your sci-fi fantasy section, for example, when I was a kid growing up reading fantasy, there's such, again, a wider range of material, of voices, of series, everything.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
We describe romantasy, which is also booming right now, as
It's doing okay.
It's it's
Hanging in there.
It's sex.
It's hanging in there, romantic.
It's sex with dragons, but not sex with dragons.
Or is it?
Or Bull Moon Rising pushing that. Sex with minotaurs. So a little steamy. And then we have L.J. Shen, who's crossed over horror and romance. She's actually coming. And so like Runix and some other authors that are really big kind of and booming with that romance horror mix, which is kind of crazy, but is working, and they have a huge following. Because Brian, you first self-published Man Fuck This House. What did you learn as a self-published writer? What did you prefer as a self-published writer? And what did you gain out of it? And Philip, sort of the same thing, but as a screenwriter. I mean, what did you pick up out of your experiences with screenwriting that you've applied to your own books now?
Yeah, so I think for me, the number one thing that I miss is the fact there used to not be an asterisk right here in the title. And that was non-negotiable. They're like, yeah, reviewers won't, like, all our emails to promote the book will go to spam if there's like a swear word in the title, because people are always writing into the New York Times saying mean things to them, I guess, whatever. So anyway, yeah. So I think that's the only thing I actually really miss. Like, the creative control was really cool, but my publisher is fantastic to work with, and I haven't really had to compromise anything. And I'd say what I learned was that when you're doing self-publishing, you're doing everything, but when you move to a bigger label, you're still doing a lot. And with self-publishing, I think a lot of people rush into it because they see it's a way to just get a book out there. I remember when I was starting out as a writer, I was so desperate to have a book in my hand, so I could feel like a real writer, and I think a lot of people rush it.
Still waiting for that feeling.
Yeah, right. I know, imposter syndrome, no joke. But I think a lot of people rush into self-publishing, and instead of taking their time and honing their craft, they go and just like throw something up, and then they get very disappointed that no one falls in love with it, and it's not a huge hit. And then, they become very disillusioned, and it's avoidable.
And as far as screenwriting is concerned, I mean, I spent a lot of time as a screenwriter, and had a couple, made a Lifetime movie, wrote some stuff for Disney, and I wrote some horror stuff and some thrillers, and shopped it around. And the thing that the moment I realized I much preferred fiction to screenwriting was because in screenwriting, you're basically laying the foundation upon which an army of people will build upon, that will build upon. And there's going to be actors, and there's going to be directors, and there's going to be production designers, and there's going to be location guys, and there's going to be budget issues, and there's going to be producers who have notes and notes and notes and notes. And you end up just being like this tool. You're just like a wrench, in this creative process. And I think, and so for me, fiction was very freeing. I mean, I've always been a fiction writer primarily first, and then screenwriting I turned to try, to see if I could because I wasn't making it as a fiction writer, so I turned to screenwriting, and then that ended up kicking my fiction career into gear, which is ironic. But so for me, I like the freedom of just like it's every word in there is mine, and it's the way I want it. And yes, you have editors who give you suggestions, but you've total creative control, and that's to me the most exciting thing. And it's ironic because, like I said, because a few of my books were screenplays that I could not sell, that I've written into stories or novels and then have now sold. So, I think that's the way it goes with Hollywood, is they like stuff that's already on the shelf. But yeah, so that for me, but as far as the writing is concerned, like I mentioned earlier, you learn one thing about screenwriting that I always recommend to people, is even for fiction writers, is because it really teaches you about story structure, and it teaches you how to tell the roots of a story. And when I started writing novels more frequently that were being published versus sitting in my hard drive, that structure was really helpful to me to kind of to pull out and be like, okay, well, this is my 3 acts. These are my beats. This is how I'm going to get through from A to Z. And it's kind of like this. It's sort of this framework that you can work within, and it actually gives you more freedom in a way, because you have a better sense of like how to tell the story, so you can really focus on telling that story.
That's incredible, and both books are absolutely phenomenal. For those of you who might be on the fence, I absolutely recommend reading both books, and read them in tandem or read them, back to back, because I just think it works really well. They're super awesome. So I'm going to open up some questions for the audience, because I see some mischievous looks and some friends in the audience. So I think I'm going to open it up so you guys can harass Brian a little bit, and Philip. And I think there's a gentleman with a mohawk back there who's got a question. No.
I don't need Brian to throw a shoe at me tonight.
All right. We'll start it with Brian McCauley.
So, Brian, this is kind of like your spin on a haunted house story, and Philip, your spin on a slasher. So I'm curious, were you thinking about, okay, here are the tropes of this subgenre that I always see, and here are the ways that I want to kind of put my spin on them, or turn them on their head? Are you thinking at all about the subgenre, or are you just kind of like, this is the form the story's taking, and you're just kind of doing your thing?
Yeah, so I definitely think about the form of the subgenre. That's one of the things that motivates me to write, is to take different tropes and figure out how to put my own stamp on them. So that was actually, forefront of my mind. And sometimes though, you have to balance, right? Because tropes exist for a reason, and people expect certain things. And sometimes you have to balance, like giving them most of what they expect with putting your spin on it, right? You still want them to have a satisfying experience, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, you could do a deconstructed slasher novel where no one dies, but that's going to be disappointing,
Everybody turns into flowers.
Yeah. Hey, I'm dangerously close to going off on a rant about Ryan Johnson here, so I'll avoid that and turn it over to Philip.
With this book, I did not think about that. It's been frustrating some interviewers that I've talked to, because there is no source material, there is no inspiration. I wasn't thinking about it. I don't even watch slashers. I've never seen a Friday the 13th movie. Although
What?
But Halloween is my favorite movie of all time. I always follow it up with that so that I'm not thrown out of the club. But yeah, no, this was literally just like, I wanted to write a story in this place. I wanted to have this element in it. I want to see how everyone reacts, and they just kind of away I went. But say with Third Rule of Time Travel, I was definitely thinking about the time travel trope. I was thinking about how can I flip some of the traditional time travel tropes on its head a little bit and tell my sort of version of a time travel story. I think if I were to write something that was a trope so I can tell you 2 examples. One, I wrote a short story called The Last Haunted House Story, and that was sort of my take on a haunted house story, and it was where the house itself was like this creature, and then I wrote a vampire story, which was like my version of a vampire story, which was but I wanted it to be like a coming of age story about a kid who was sort of wasn't sure if he was a vampire or not, because his mom was not and his dad was. In those examples, yeah, I was definitely thinking about trope. But for this book specifically, no, this book came at me like a wave. I couldn't write it fast enough, and I wasn't thinking about anything but Rose and Miller and Autumn Springs.
Man, you really got to watch Jason X. It's amazing.
But then I have to watch the first 9, and I don't know if I can do that.
No, you can.
I can just
no,
go right to X?
No, actually start with Jason Goes to Hell and then go to Jason X.
Is that the one where he's in space, X?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's so realistic. You feel like you're in space with him. So.
Nothing like fighting Jason in space, right? The boogeyman in space. S.A. Barnes, although if you want a good ghost story in space, Ghost Station, great book. All right, another question. Excellent. Yes, you've got to harass Brian.
No, I figured out how to say it without being a troll.
I'm taking my shoe off.
No.
Careful.
Brian, you are an outspoken opponent of all AI use.
Yes.
And you're, as am I, I'm a kindred spirit here, but I want to say you're more in the trenches headbutting and throwing punches than I am usually. How do you see that trend going? Do you see it starting to die off? Do you see intelligent people abandoning it? Or do you see it gathering steam and becoming more of a wall that we're going to have to, strive to tear down?
That's a great question. So first of all, I'll say that no intelligent people support Gen AI in the arts. Not a single one. So anyone who does that is by definition stupid. But yeah, and so just to clarify my stance a little bit, I actually work with AI in my day job to some extent. I'm not anti-AI as a technology. I'm against AI creating art. And I'm very against that. And so, yeah, I have gotten into some. I actually really dislike fighting with people online, and so that's why I never post about politics or anything. Is I really don't like fighting with people online. But to me, the Gen AI thing is just way too important because if human beings are no longer creating art, then what the hell are we doing here? It's like in the new Nosferatu, there's a line that Count Orlok has where he says, "I am an appetite, nothing more." Right. And if we allow machines to create art for us, then we just become these endless loops of literal just consumers. Right. And all we do is consume and stimulate our brains and consume and stimulate our brains. And that seems like a completely hellish existence. As far as where the trend's going, I don't think that that AI art is gaining traction really. And I even hate calling it art. I usually say AI images and words or something like that, just to say, because art by definition, I go with Scott McCloud's definition of art, which is anything a human being does that is not necessary for survival or reproduction. So, when you think about that, if I just start tapping like this, right, that's not necessary for survival or reproduction. That's art. I'm making art just by tapping the table, very anti-rhythmically there. So I think luckily we do have some things in place, at least here in the United States, that are really helping AI prevent AI from gaining traction. So copyright law is hugely in our favor right now. So you can't copyright the product of generative AI, which means that there's not a lot of incentive for most entertainment companies to invest in AI art. Right. We did a panel at StokerCon last year with Scott Sigler and a bunch of other people where we talked about, the rise of AI art, and I made the point that if selling books was just as easy as just churning out endless content, right, then, we could have companies would just create these content farms in India. There's 1 billion people in India and a lot of them speak English, right? And we've outsourced a lot of stuff there, right? So why not, instead of a call center, why not have a bunch of people sitting around there writing Star Wars novels all day long, right? And then selling them. That doesn't work, And so there's all these situations where just churning out more content is not going to help you sell more books. And so I think there's a lot of factors like that are in our favor. That was a very long answer.
But a very important one. I think that a lot of authors are concerned because a lot of books have been scanned into AI, their own work, and gone against the kind of the trend or the copyright that we're having. And, to try to teach them it's supposedly to teach them natural language. But there's that question. I mean, if you ask AI, Gemini to tell you a story, it's going to come up with something, but, who knows?
Right. Yeah. It's going to be pulling from every book it's ever read and putting something together. Right. And yeah.
And that's why Wall-E always seemed like a horror novel to me, or a horror story. When he finally gets into space and everybody's in kind of those pods and moving around and just consuming.
Yep. Yeah,
And-
it's a very Wall-E future.
Yeah, it's a little scary. All right, absolutely. Chris?
My question is about Chat GPT. No, I'm just kidding. I'm curious for both of you writing short stories and then writing novels. When you have an idea, how do you sort of determine, like, okay, when's the story complete? Like, how do I not go too far? Like, what's the width? What's the depth of it? Because the short stories are amazing and the novels are amazing, but I could see that temptation to like build and build and build and build. So do you kind of have a gauge of where like, okay, that's the story. I think it's complete. I think I've said what it needed to say. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I pretty much know when I have an idea what form it's going to take. If it's going to be a short story or a novella or a novel. So I just know how much. I just know how much story there is there. So if I have an idea, like I mentioned Alter earlier, like if I have an idea that's kind of a quick hit, thing, then I know that, okay, it's not something I want to probably pursue as a novel, but I like the idea enough, so I'm going to write it as like a short story. And sometimes those short stories can grow still. Like I seem incapable of writing a short story that's less than 10,000 words for some reason. So even when I have a quick idea, it ends up kind of like, I want to give a little background. I want to do this, but I always know. And and you have to kind of know in a way because you approach, at least for me, I don't speak for myself, I approach them completely differently. So if I'm writing a short story, my process is, I have an idea, and I sit at my computer and I put on all caps. Don't ask me why, because I don't know the answer. And I literally just like go blah 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 blah, and I write like a page, and then I print it out, and that's my outline for the short story. And then I write the story based on that vomit. And with a novel, it's like I said earlier, it's completely different. Where I'm like, okay, if I have an idea, and then I'm like, that's kind of cool, and then, well, maybe this character could do this, and maybe it could expand into that. And if like I think about an idea, much like Autumn Springs, and if bounce it around for a few days, and if like, characters start popping up and walking around and talking, and I start getting excited and I start seeing scenes. Oh, this could happen. Oh, this scene could happen. Oh, I'm thinking. Then I know it's like I've got something. Like with time travel, I had like 3 of the key scenes. I knew exactly, they were in my mind before I even started writing the book. So I just knew it was a bigger story. So it's a totally different approach. So I know going in, this is a novel, this is a or screenplay, but this is a novel, this is a short story. But it really comes down to how much is there. The only time it's ever, and I'm usually always right, the only time I haven't been right is when I wrote a story called Gothic that I wrote as a novella. It's about a haunted desk. And I was like, there's no way I can stretch that into a novel. And as I wrote it as a novella, and it kind of kept growing and growing. It ended up being like a 45,000 word novella. And my agent at the time was like, dude, just add 30,000 words and it's a novel. And we're going to, but she thought it was really good. And she thought there was a lot more to tell. So, she was right. So that's the one time where I expanded a novella idea into a novel. But for the most part, I know going in what something is.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing for me. Like generally now I'm at a point where like any project I'm doing, I kind of have a request, whether it's a novel for my publisher or if I've been invited to submit a short story to an anthology or something. I only do short stories on request now. So I know what it has to be. And so I allow myself to only do that much. I will say, 2 of the stories in here, the last 2, Line of Sight and The Tire Swing, started life as shorter short stories. And they're both technically novelettes now. I think they're both around 15,000 words or something like that. So, sometimes things do change. And sometimes if an idea is becoming its own thing, I just got to let it go.
One of my personal favorite litmus tests is if the person writes a great short story, they're probably also a great novelist, because writing a short story to me, or a screenplay, is flippin' hard. Yeah. One of the hardest things that you can write.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that comic books. I think for my money, comic books are the hardest kind of writing, except maybe poetry.
Yeah, and the other thing about short stories, to to kind of answer part of your question is sometimes it's hard to start stories to know how long to make it, and because sometimes you're like, oh, this is going on too long. Like I'm taking too long to get there, and then sometimes you're like, the opposite of that, and you're like, I really want to dig more into this and kind of like let it breathe and let the characters breathe a little bit. And I'm and it's funny because I often get feedback on stories where it's kind of the opposite of what I thought it would be. Like I wrote a story called D7, which is about a haunted jukebox, and it's like a 10,000 word story, but like, and it was released as a standalone novella from Shortwave, and a lot of the critical feedback on that novella was like, it's too short, and I was like, man, I thought I was really stretching it, So with short stories, it can be a little tricky. Like I'm writing a short story right now, for example, that's for an upcoming anthology, and there's like a word, and all these anthologies have like word limits, and I'm totally, as I always do, going long. And so as I've been rewriting it and thinking about, can I cut this back? Can I cut this back? And so with short fiction, it's a little more tricky because with the novels, there is no finish line. You can go as long as you feel you want to go, and your editor may tell you like it's too long, or you can cut this or cut that, or they want to expand characters, like I mentioned earlier. They actually want it longer. So, but with short fiction, it is tricky. It's kind of a feel thing. You're like, am I getting bored? And if I'm getting bored, am I boring the reader, or am I giving too much detail, or if I'm giving too much characterization? So you want to keep the pace at a certain. You're always worrying about pace. You're worrying about characterization. You worry about the big punches that you're throwing. Are they landing correctly? Are you taking too long to get there? All that stuff is packed into like a short story.
One of our online people from Italy wanted to know, what is it that you both love about horror, and what is it that scares you?
Ooh, good question. So I think I have a very similar answer to what Philip said earlier, which is I love horror because it's kind of the biggest tent possible. You can do essentially anything. You can write horror in space like Alien, or the masterpiece that is Jason X. You can write horror fantasy got Brian McNaughton and his book The Throne of Bones, which is just one of the most amazing pieces of horror I've ever read, and it's set in a secondary fantasy world, but highly recommend that to everyone, by the way. So it's such a versatile genre. And then what scares me, heights, for sure. I do not like heights, and I got on a plane to fly here today, which is how much I love all of you. And let's see, what else? That's like the main thing. Oh, my other weird thing, I won't look in a mirror at night with the lights off. If I get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I will not look in the mirror while I'm doing whatever I need to do. And actually, the reason for that is not because I'm worried I'm going to see a ghost. I'm worried that like my brain fog, like my foggy brain, will think it sees something, and then I won't be able to get back to sleep.
I have this like fear of home invasion, so that's kind of like my one thing. I've never written a home invasion story, probably because I don't want to address that fear, but I just don't like the idea of somebody in my house touching my stuff. It's really terrifying to think that somebody would like touch my stuff and then like leave. I just don't. Yeah, that's creepy to me. There's also
don't Google frogging. That will terrify.
I know what frogging is, and I'm also terrified of my bathroom at home. If my wife and I fight all the time because not really, but because I always you forgot to close the bathroom door, because when it's open, I feel like a presence in there at night. And it really legit terrifies me. So I always have to close the bathroom door at night. So I'm afraid of my bathroom. I'm okay with the bathroom normally during business hours, just not at night.
I grew up in a house. We lived in Denver for a while, and nobody lived in the house longer than a year. And I do have to say that when I heard my name sound like my mom coming from the basement, and my mom was out grocery shopping, I never went back down to that basement alone in that house ever again. So I agree.
Patrick, come down here and help me with this.
Yeah, and you're like, no, I'm going to continue playing Super Mario 3.
Yeah. I once had an experience when I was on location at a house called it's it's notoriously called the I want to say the Party of Five house, but that's wrong. The 6 Feet Under house, and it's notoriously haunted, as is the murder house from American Horror Story, where I also filmed and saw a ghost. But anyway, at one point I was alone in this house, and the crew had left, and I was waiting for the security guy to come so I could leave, and I was alone. I was standing in the middle of the house, and I distinctly heard a voice behind my ear say, "Get out!" And I turned to see who was behind me, and there was nobody there. The house was empty, but I legit was like, "Oh, who's here?" Oh, and there was nobody there because I legit heard somebody say something into my ear, and just to my credit, I immediately left the house. I did not hang out. I did not investigate. I was like, bye. I'm out.
You're like determined not to be a character in one of your.
No,
own
I
books,
was like, I will wait for the security guy on the sidewalk. That's what I did.
Any other questions from the audience here? Excellent.
You both have sort of already hinted at some answers to my question, but I'm wondering what you are reading right now, what you are watching right now that is influencing you, and you are thinking is just, wow, this is awesome.
Let's see. So a couple of really good movies I've seen so far this year. My top movies this year are The Rule of Jenny Penn, which is actually set in a retirement home. Let's see what else. Presence. I thought that was a really cool take on a haunting. And Dead Male, which is on Shudder. Not a lot of people have seen it. It's a period piece set in the 80s about a dead letter investigator who finds like a bloody note for help in like the dead letter office, and kind of goes from there in some very unexpected directions. So I think those are pretty much my 3 favorite movies of the year. I also just watched The Home with Pete Davidson, which was I found a little bit slow for the first half, but it really, really paid off. So definitely recommend that one as well. And you want to give some movies?
Yeah. I liked. I found Weapons very inspiring. I found The Monkey, in a way, very inspiring. I mean, whenever I see, for me, it's about it's about artistic vision. You know, if I watch something and I know that even if it's a low budget movie, that I know it's like that was the director's vision I just saw. I find that really fascinating and inspiring, and I like those 2 directors, Zach Greger and who's the monkey guy,
Oz Perkins.
Oz Perkins, yeah, Osgood. So I like both. I like Sinners very much. I thought Sinners did a very good job of being very commercial and also telling a very dark horror story, but also getting like across that commercial kind of appeal, and it looked beautiful. And so seeing a horror story presented on that canvas was really inspiring to me. So those are some movies I haven't read. I read and I read a lot for work, as it were, and we read a lot of blurb or what have you, and so I don't get a lot of free reading time. But I did read a book called Daytide recently, which is coming out next year, from Chris I always screwed up. Panettiere, thank you. That's about like drunken angels invading, or coming to Earth and stealing like our beliefs, and so feeding themselves on it. It's a pretty cool book. It's one of the more original ideas I've seen in a long time. So I really enjoyed reading that. I think it's coming out in March of next year, spring of next year.
Those are excellent answers. And for those of you who are online, we're going to say goodnight because we're at an hour, and our sudden comfort chairs are suddenly uncomfortable after about an hour. And I'm sure you guys want to talk with Philip and Brian one-on-one and take the time. That's the benefit of coming to a book signing, even on a rainy night like tonight. So first of all, let's give these gentlemen a big round of applause. Thank you so much. We'll ask everybody before you guys get up. We're just ending it online. We will ask you once we get up to put the chairs against the side on the right side, because if you put on the left, they'll fall all over you. But I've got 3 books to give away. Oh, nice. So first of all, I want to know who came the furthest